China sends 71 warplanes into Taiwan's airspace. A Phoenix Superior Court judge rules against Kari Lake in an election lawsuit. And I discuss how much music has changed in the past 100 years. I'm Julie Hartman, and this is Timeless. Wednesday, December 28th, 2022. Welcome back, everyone. I hope that you had a lovely holiday. For our first news story of the day, 71 warplanes were detected flying in or near Taiwan's airspace Sunday, which included 60 fighter jets, according to the Taiwan Defense Ministry. The People's Liberation Army of China says that they were conducting a strike drill in response to collusion between the United States and Taiwan. It's unclear what those collusions were. They seem like a reason China's just giving in order to survey the land for a possible invasion. Ever since Chiang Kai-shek and the Nationalist Party of China declared their control of Taiwan in 1949 after losing the Civil War, the United States, including most recently President Biden, has pledged to defend Taiwan against communist aggression from the mainland. But this, among other actions, proves that China is now in its most assertive stance against Taiwan in its history. At the 20th Communist Party Congress in October, President Xi Jinping urged China's military to, quote, focus all of its energy on fighting in preparation for war, and affirmed China's right to take all necessary measures to seize Taiwan. They also added a part to their constitution which says that it is, quote, resolutely opposing and deterring Taiwan's independence. In addition to historical claims where the CCP says that Taiwan was once originally part of China and should be reunited with the mainland, Taiwan is especially important to China right now because the Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company produces 92% of the world's advanced microchips, which are the critical technologies that are required in cars, computers, televisions, and all other high-end digital appliances. Now, TSMC's closest competitor is South Korea, which only produces 5% of the chips. China, as we've talked about, has achieved phenomenal economic growth over the past 2 decades, which has given them unprecedented power and control over most technological manufacturing. A single factory in China made 85% of the world's iPhone Pros. But they have a vulnerability. China produces none of these advanced microchips and imports all of them from Taiwan. So with Xi's bold visions for a Chinese future and companies like Apple trying to move parts of their business out of China, China is less willing to accept having any supply chain dependence, and especially on a land that they view as theirs. Even though we, the United States, have committed ourselves to defending Taiwan, the sad news is that we may not be as capable of doing so as we have been in the past. The Chinese military has surpassed us in having the largest and most powerful navy in the world. According to a report by the U.S. Congressional Research Service that was published on December 1st, sometime between 2015 and 2020, China's Navy surpassed the U.S. Navy in the number of, quote, battle force ships, those that the Pentagon counts in determining the size of our Navy and other navies. China now has 340 of these ships, and the report projects that it will grow to 400 by 2025 and 440 by 2030. We, by comparison, only have 294 battle force ships right now, with at least 37 scheduled for decommissioning, and that means that this number will actually shrink to 290 or 291 in 2025. The Navy's 7th Fleet, which is responsible for the Western Pacific, has 50 to 60 of such ships, about half of which are at sea at any time. But only 18 of these ships are based at forward installations in Guam or Japan. and most of the rest are based here in the United States, weeks away from reaching Taiwan. The state of our air power, too, is no less alarming. A U.S. General Accounting Office in June 2022 found that aircraft readiness in both the Navy and the Air Force was worse today than in 2015 due to age of aircraft fleets, lack of parts, maintenance delays, and other sustainment issues. And in late October of 2022, the Air Force announced that it was withdrawing 2 F-15 fighter jet squadrons from Okinawa, Japan, after 43 years there, and that it has no current plans to replace them. So again, we have a diminished ability to reach Taiwan quickly should they need our help. Meanwhile, China is increasing its arsenal of nuclear warheads from 400 now to between 1,000 and 1,500 by approximately 2035. Now, it's important to note that the likelihood that China will invade Taiwan is diminished by the misfortune and fierce resistance that Russia has met in invading Ukraine and the widespread condemnation and punitive sanctions that the West has imposed in response. But between invasion and no action lies a middle course of a Chinese naval blockade, a quarantine, of Taiwan, which probably has become more likely. Such a maritime blockade on the Chinese side of the median line might be coupled with a limited no-fly cordon around Taiwan, which could restrict or prohibit the entry of offensive combat aircrafts, but allow cargo planes and other civilian airliners in and out of the island. A quarantine may actually be a smarter move pursued by the Chinese to catch the United States off guard. It would allow the Chinese further but still incomplete control over escalation, and it would be a crafty way for Xi Jinping to divide public opinion in the United States on how we should react. Now, unfortunately, nothing in President Biden's record gives us any comfort that he has these risks well thought through. Let's play a clip of what he said back in 2019.
Eat our lunch? Come on, man. They can't even figure out how to deal with the fact that they have this great division between the China Sea and the mountains in the west. They can't figure out how they're going to deal with the corruption that exists within the system. I mean, they're not bad folks, but guess what? They're not competition for us.
The CCP must be laughing. Now, in domestic news, a Phoenix Superior Court judge, Peter Thompson, has ruled against Kari Lake, the Republican Arizona gubernatorial candidate who is challenging the results of the election last month. In a lawsuit filed against Maricopa County Board of Supervisors, Maricopa County Recorder Stephen Richer, Elections Co-Director Scott Jarrett, and Katie Hobbs, her Democratic opponent and Secretary of State, Kari Lake's legal team has said that, quote, hundreds of thousands of illegal ballots infected the election in Maricopa County, and that problems with equipment along with long lines has disenfranchised Republican voters. Maricopa County is the largest county in Arizona, which has 60% of all of Arizona's registered voters. And on Election Day, there were several issues with vote counting, which included printer and tabulator issues. The two printer problems were that, number one, the timestamp on the ballot did not print in dark enough ink, and number two, some ballots were printed with a 19-inch image onto a 20-inch piece of paper. Both of these problems led to the tabulator rejecting some or all of the ballots with these issues. On Election Day, Chairman of Maricopa Board of Supervisors Bill Gates held a press conference in which he acknowledged these issues. He said in about 20% of the 223 vote centers across the country, when people will go and try to run the ballot through the tabulator, maybe 1 out of every 5 or so of those ballots are not going to go through. Now, Lake is claiming that this led to voter disenfranchisement since people had to wait in 1 to 5 hour lines to wait for the tabulators to be fixed, or they were told to go to another polling location to drop off their ballots. Now, again, this supervisor, Bill Gates, has counter-argued that this was not voter disenfranchisement, because voters could drop their ballots off in what's called a secure box for them to be counted later. But what Mr. Gates does not acknowledge is that part of the reason why voters showed up to vote on Election Day instead of voting early by mail is that they don't trust that votes will be counted correctly later, and they want to see in person their votes being counted or tabulated right in front of them. Lake has also pointed out in her lawsuit that 17,000 people dropped their ballots into these secure boxes, which is the margin of victory that Katie Hobbs defeated Kari Lake. Additionally, 2 men who ran Election Day operations in Maricopa County, one of them being Stephen Richer, the Maricopa County recorder that I mentioned, started a super PAC with almost all of the money going towards defeating Kari Lake. This was called the Pro-Democracy Republicans PAC, and it said on its website that it was time for Republicans to, quote, accept and acknowledge that Trump lost the 2020 presidential election, and that the PAC was designed to, quote, support pro-democracy Arizona Republicans. Lake has famously had doubts about the results of the fairness of the 2020 presidential election, which is probably why a lot of that money in that super PAC was dedicated towards defeating her. Lake's legal team has called for the judge to hold a new election in Arizona or declare her as governor. But the problem is that a judge does not have any statutory authority to hold a new election. The only legal recourse that Lake could get is to have her declared as governor, since the law is designed to say that if there is enough evidence that there was enough misconduct that would have significantly affected the results of the election, then the loser must be declared the winner. Even though a judge could hypothetically go out on a limb and hold a new election, and God knows we see judges ruling on things all the time that have no statutory basis, a reason why the law does not permit judges to hold new elections is that if they were given that statutory authority, new elections would be held all of the time. But because the only legal remedy is to declare Lake as governor, and because widespread malfeasance is difficult to prove, judges are quite hesitant to say that there was enough evidence to definitively impact the results. So Judge Thompson ruled on Christmas Eve that Lake lacked, quote, clear and convincing evidence of intentional misconduct in Maricopa County. So Katie Hobbs, again the Democratic Secretary of State, is slated to be sworn in as governor of Arizona on January 5th, and Lake has vowed to appeal. Now on to a non-political, non-newsy topic. I want to talk to you today about music. This past weekend, as I was listening to old Christmas songs like Silent Night, Feliz Navidad, Frosty the Snowman, and Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, I had a seemingly obvious but not widely acknowledged observation that there have not been any notable new Christmas songs in the past several decades. In fact, most of the Christmas songs that we listen to were recorded between 1950 and 1980. And so I looked it up, and Good Housekeeping magazine published a list of the 85 best Christmas songs of all time. And in the top 50, only one song, number 28, called It Must Be Santa by Bob Dylan, was from this century. The other 49 songs were all recorded before the year 2000, and only 4 of them were recorded in the 1990s. Why is this? I think that it's because the spirit of Christmas traditionally speaks to kindness, generosity, and respectful reconciliation with others. And these just aren't values that are held in high esteem today, and they certainly are not evident in our music. So this observation about holiday songs, as well as this being the week that Spotify Wrapped is released, has inspired me to generally talk about how much music has changed over the past century in America and what it reveals about our society. From the 1930s to the early 1960s, American popular music was characterized by optimism, confidence, and a sense of fun, which is especially impressive given that Americans had just endured the Great Depression, which brought great hardship and suffering, obviously. But this was music that people heard on the radio or on vinyl records. And in addition to honoring and celebrating traditional American culture and virtue, it reflected a shared vision of life as a difficult but exhilarating and wonderful experience. Two musical standards that reflect this are real oldies, both from the 1930s. The first song is Noel Coward's You're the Top from the 1934 Broadway show Anything Goes. And this song is what's called a list song, where he sings a list of creative compliments to someone that he admires. So let's listen to 20 seconds of You're the Top.
You're the top. You're the Coliseum. You're the top. You're the Louvre Museum. You're a melody from a symphony by Strauss. You're a Bendel bonnet, a Shakespeare sonnet. You're Mickey Mouse.
So let's look at what he said in that short clip. You're the Coliseum. You're the Louvre Museum. You're a melody from a symphony by Strauss. You're a Bendel bonnet, a Shakespeare sonnet. You're Mickey Mouse. It's a way of praising people that we just don't get today. Throughout this song, he makes 37 references to people, places, and things. And it's optimistic, it's fun, it's sophisticated, and most of all, these lists fill you with a magical feeling of awe at the world's offerings and vastness. It makes you think about the glory of the Colosseum or the beauty of a Shakespeare sonnet. And in other lines, he sings, "You're Mahatma Gandhi," that's what he says, he pronounces it Gandhi. "You're Napoleon Brandy. You're the purple light of a summer night in Spain. You're the National Gallery. You're Garbo's salary. You're cellophane." And you think about each of those and you rediscover the offerings of the world through the music. And the other cool thing about this song is, yes, as I said, he talks about monuments and museums, but he also talks about brandy and cellophane and Mickey Mouse. He shows the range of life's richness, from the grand to the everyday, from the sophisticated to the silly. Now, as another example, here's a short clip from Fred Astaire's song Cheek to Cheek from the 1935 movie Top Hat, where he discusses the thrill of dancing with his lover.
Heaven, I'm in heaven, and the cares that hung around me through the week seem to vanish like a gambler's lucky streak when we're out together dancing cheek to cheek.
It does sound a little slow to our ear as modern people, but what's important to note is that we just don't hear people say stuff like that anymore. We don't hear people say that they're in heaven, or we don't have people who have the vulnerability of being able to admit that it's magical to dance with a girl. Now, part of that is because we just don't dance with each other anymore. Maybe we dance with our friends, or we dance alone at bars, we jump up and down and do weird moves, but we don't have venues where we dance with other people, where we do that with one another. So like You're the Top, this song reminds you that life gives you those fun moments where you can escape from, as Fred Astaire says, the worries of the week and become lost in the euphoria of dancing. Now, this character of American music as uplifting, hopeful, the future is bright and I can handle adversity, continued for decades through World War II and for 20 years after. Even music from this time that seemed to have a down message in the lyrics, such as Frank Sinatra's That's Life or Bobby Darin's Mac the Knife, had an optimistic beat and tone, and it seemed to indicate that there was something to be happy about life and there was some reason to go on. So let's listen to a part of That's Life.
I've been a puppet, a pauper, a pirate, a poet, a pawn and a king. I've been up and down and over and out, and I know one thing. Each time I find myself flat on my face, I pick myself up and get back in the race.
and Elton John's I'm Still Standing, which those of you who've listened to me guest host for Dennis know is my favorite song of all time. Let's play it.
Don't you know I'm still standing better than I ever did, looking like a true survivor, feeling like a little kid, and I'm still standing after all this time, picking up the pieces of my life without you on my mind. I'm still standing.
How different those songs are from the messages that we get now, where everyone has experienced trauma and there's racism and homophobia and transphobia and sexism and hidden bias lurking around every corner, and that you can blame this terrible society for all of your woes. Those songs that I just played, they don't exactly trivialize life's hardships, but they kind of have this tune of, yeah, I've been through it. It sucked. We've all been slapped in the face. But the upbeatness of the song indicates that there's something ennobling about going through that and being able to weather it. Another song that totally captures this is probably up there with Elton John's Still Standing as one of my favorite all-time songs, and it's the 1976 theme song of the movie Rocky called Gonna Fly Now. Let's play it. Now, the lyrics of the song, which I didn't play, but we all know them, says, trying hard now. It's so hard now. Oh, he's ready. Gonna make a move. Getting strong now. Won't be long now. Going to fly now. Talk about optimism. And even without the lyrics, you can just hear the message in the music. It's kind of sad, but also marvelously uplifting. And the beginning part of dun 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 dun, it makes you feel like you're leading up to something. And it imparts to you that if you work hard enough, you can do anything. Now, I'm going to get to more contemporary songs in just a minute, but I want to right now compare this Rocky tune with what one can argue is its modern counterpart, DJ Khaled's All I Do Is Win.
All I do is win, 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 no matter what. Got money on my mind, I can never get enough. And every time I step up in the building, everybody hands go up.
Okay, not going to lie, great song if you're on a run, but if you want to compare it to the Rocky song, the Rocky message is, this is so hard, I'm going to fight and I'm going to prevail. Whereas the DJ Khaled song, as catchy as it is, it just tells you, everything I do is automatically successful, I love money, and everyone loves me. So what does it really teach you about life? The answer is nothing. As I indicated earlier, love songs in the mid-20th century were so sweet and different than today. There really aren't that many love songs anymore. There are heartbreak songs, there are a lot of songs about sex and the pleasure component of being with a partner, but really there are very few about romance and deep love. Think of Nat King Cole's L-O-V-E. L is for the way you look at me, that song. That one, so romantic. Or Dean Martin's Non-Dementicar, another great romantic song. Or Frank Sinatra's The Way You Look Tonight. Men and women, but especially men, don't have the strength and vulnerability to express those messages anymore. Now, the tide did start to turn around the 1960s and 70s with Elvis, the British invasion of American music from the Beatles and the Rolling Stones, and people like Elton John, Bruce Springsteen, Madonna, Michael Jackson, and my favorite, Billy Joel. Elvis, of course, made rock and roll music famous. And though he did have some sweet songs like Can't Help Falling in Love with You, the vast majority of his songs like Hound Dog and Jailhouse Rock were more brooding, more earthy and visceral than what had been done before. For instance, Hound Dog, which is a super fun song, what is that really about? It doesn't seem to have an underlying lesson or message or commentary on the world. Similarly, if you look at the Beatles or the Rolling Stones, though they also had some conventional or old school contemplative songs like Let It Be or In My Life, a lot of their songs were more sensory, more selfish and suggestive, and less inhibited than what had gone on before. The tone of the songs shifted to more of what I feel like doing here and now, and not at all about how I should deal with life's challenges. So this is 9 seconds of Satisfaction by the Rolling Stones. And a short clip of Please Please Me by the Beatles.
Come on, please, please me, oh yeah, like I please you.
I will admit, in doing research for this segment, I didn't know either of these songs, but what I did notice in those songs are the I, me component of those. Contrast what you just heard with Noel Coward's You're the Top. You're the Colosseum. You're the Tower of Pisa. It's about the other person. Though the mood of American music was shifting, as compared with the music of today, again, songs still did reflect more of these traditional virtues like self-improvement. Think of Michael Jackson's Man in the Mirror or Elton John's, I guess that's why they call it the blues, where he has a line where he says that you should take time to, quote, dust out the demons inside. A lot of songs also talked about male-female chivalry. Think about Billy Joel's Tell Her About It, as well as themes about the passage of time, like Bruce Springsteen's Glory Days. Songs were also understood as not just things that made you feel good, but ways for you to process and reflect on all aspects of life, that the bad parts of life are parts of life too, and by facing them, you can find meaning in them. So the second to last song I'll play for you today is Flogging Molly's If I Ever Leave This World Alive. It's this beautiful Irish song. It's about a man who is dying. And he says, if I ever leave this world alive, meaning if I'm lucid or awake, if I get to the other side, here is what I will do.
If I ever leave this world alive, I'll take on all the sadness that I left behind. If I ever leave this world alive, the madness that you feel will soon subside. So in a word, don't shed a tear. I'll be here when it all gets weird. If I ever leave this world alive.
And then the song ends with him saying that his wife, who is the she that you're about to hear, is telling him from her bedside, but to his grave, that she is okay with his passing. Let's play that.
I'm okay. I'm all right. Though you have gone from my life, you said that it would. Now everything should be all right. She says, I'm okay. I'm all right. Though you have gone from my life, you said that it would. Now everything should be all right.
See, it's obviously a very sad message, but it also has an uplifting tune to it, and it helps you process the range of emotions that one goes through when encountering a situation like this. And we just don't have those kinds of music anymore. Now, as the 1980s started, technology changed everything. Not just the way that people listen to music, but music itself. In 1981, Sony introduced the Walkman, a portable device where a person could listen to mixtapes or custom recorded cassette tapes with curated playlists just for them. So this was hugely important because it eliminated the phenomenon of popular music. In the earlier 20th century, as I mentioned, the only way for people to listen to music was either on the radio or by buying a vinyl LP album. So this limited the choices for people, and it meant that music was played or offered for sale to buy was heavily weighted towards what had the broadest appeal and what would sell the best. So there needed, just kind of naturally, there needed to be more of a consensus in American culture of what their values were and what kind of music they wanted. But the Walkman, and of course later the iPod and the iPhone, those were the start of the fragmentation of music, where people could curate the kinds of music that they liked, and they could avoid and be completely unaware of the music that they did not want to be exposed to. This had the great outcome of allowing unknown artists or niche musical acts and styles to come to the fore, and it replaced the clumsy one-size-fits-all mass market tools. But it also made the coarse, violent, misogynistic music that we would have never allowed to be played on the radio more mainstream and acceptable today. Another fascinating thing that changed music was the creation of a channel called MTV. Bet you heard of that one, music television, which began running on cable TV in 1981, and it was created to show music videos, a relatively new phenomenon that accompanied the release of a new single or album. This revolutionized the way that we experience music, which has been great in many ways, but it also has made music less about contemplation and more about entertainment or shock factors. Now we're in the age of Ariana Grande, Dua Lipa, Beyonce, Nicki Minaj, and Kanye.
Let's go to the beach, each, let's go get a wave. They say what they gonna say. Have a drink, clink, found a Bud Light. Bad bitches like me, it's hard to come by. The Patron, let's go get it down. The sound, yes, I'm in the
wait till I get my money right.
I had a dream I could buy my way to heaven. When I awoke, I spent that on a necklace. I told God I'll be back in a second. Man, it's so hard not to act reckless. To whom much is given, much is tested. Get arrested, guess until he get the message. I feel the pressure.
With the exception of Kanye, who I'm really obviously disgusted with right now as a person, I love these artists and I love these songs and I listen to them all the time. But we have to recognize how stupid and vapid and at many times corrosive the messages of these songs are. We have lost the emotional and intellectual sophistication to listen to slow, contemplative music. Most of us are drawn to cheap, self-aggrandizing songs that make us feel like we're walking into a stadium and everyone's yelling our name. We can't even bear to listen to 15 seconds of an old song. What does that say about our maturity? Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope that you enjoyed these segments. And remember, like a sculptor starting with a block of clay and the tools to form it, each of our thoughts, choices, and actions shape who we are. So let's think clearly, choose wisely, and act with principle and determination. See you tomorrow.